Thank you for that lovely introduction. Thank you for having me. Thank you everyone for just getting out of bed at this time of morning. I congratulate you. I'm ashamed to admit, but I need to admit that I have registered for so many creative mornings and it is hard to get out of bed, so I have missed some. So I appreciate it. I appreciate the effort. Thank you very much. Now, I'd also like to pay my respects and acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, who are the true custodians of the land that we live and thrive and create upon in this city of Naarm. I think it's really important, especially to fellow settlers, to remind ourselves that we are on the stolen land of the oldest living culture in the world. And it's really important to consistently remind ourselves to look for opportunities in our work, in our personal lives, to sort of right our ancestral wrongs. And a lot of that has to do with design and sustainability and activism, which we'll be talking about today. Secondly, I just wanted to ask, how is everyone else here? How are you? How are you really? Good? So, okay, all right, okay. Give me a woo if you have had an existential crisis in the last 6 months. Woo! Yes! Amazing, cool. Give me a yes if you felt overwhelmed by the state of the world recently. Yes! Okay, we're all in this together, guys, okay. And give me another woo if you have felt a little bit hopeful in the state of the world recently. Woo! Yeah, okay, all right. It seems like we're all on a similar level. That's great. Well, welcome. We're all in a good mindset for this. Because today's theme is movement, and I am sort of using this as an invitation to join me in the movement of meaningful work, even when we are feeling overwhelmed and shitting our pants about the state of the world, but feeling slightly hopeful, which is great. And really it's an invitation to sort of join me in the movement, create your own movements, and those movements always create ripples, which ripple out into your sphere of influence that then create bigger movements. So just a bit of an intro into me. My background is design. I'm an experiential designer, spatial designer, graphic designer. I design brand activations, exhibitions, and for events. And as you can imagine, in that world, it's quite wasteful. So as Jessamy previously stated, the industry creates over 100,000 tonnes of waste each year. It's an industry that is completely unregulated in terms of policy and what you can create and how much shit you can throw in the bin, which is depressing, but also huge opportunities for change in that industry. So for the last 5 years or so, I have been focusing on getting my slides in order. I've been focusing on how we can accelerate the circular economy in that industry. So has anyone heard of the circular economy before, or circular design? Yeah, cool, awesome. So circular design is all about really closing the loop, in a simple way of explaining it, really closing the loop for the resources that we're using in the world. And as you can imagine, with events and exhibitions and brand activations, they are things that use materials that are designed to last a lifetime. They have really destructive extraction processes with a lot of negative externalities through the transport, the manufacturing processes and the use processes. And sometimes they're used for a couple of hours and thrown in the bin, and sometimes they're used for a couple of weeks and thrown in the bin. But that's freaking crazy. So we're looking at adopting more and pushing more circularity in these realms of this industry that can be quite wasteful and unregulated. And as Jessamy also mentioned, one of the first projects for the City of Melbourne that these circular design principles were actually used was Melbourne Knowledge Week. And there's some examples here about circular principles that were attached to this project. Everything was designed with circularity in mind, from things that are designed to be remanufactured, disassembled, considering the entire life cycle of materials that we're using. For example, the curtain that's shown up here, which is created by a local textile fabric manufacturer, Weft Textiles. It's made of hemp, and the reason we chose hemp is because when you grow hemp, it actually pulls toxins out of the soil and it sequesters carbon. And then we also designed it in a way so the sizes of the curtains that we made were really great for then turning into pillowcases and other products at the end of their lives. So really thinking about full life cycle and taking ownership and responsibility over the shit that we're putting out into the world, which is something that we should all be doing. I also get to design fun stuff. This is my project for Melbourne Design Week next month. If you're around, come check it out. This is called Symphonic Skateboarding, and they are skatable sculptures which make sounds when you skate on them. If you haven't learned to skate yet, come down and I'll teach you and try it out. I'm currently a lead designer at Frank Wild, and this is one of our recent projects. Frank Wild, Frank Wild is an events agency with a sustainability focus, and they take it really seriously, which is fantastic. It's not just talk. So this was one of our recent projects where we applied a lot of circular design methods. We also used waste as a resource. Some of these tables here that you can see are actually made from Tetra packaging, used Tetra packaging. And we use a lot of things like disassembly, waste as a resource, hiring things instead of buying things, and really limiting our waste as much as possible. I also do this and this, stand up in front of people and talk. I run workshops in circular design for all types of designers. And last but not least, I am a skateboarder. Here is proof of me at the skate park with a phone in my hand. That's what we do most of the time. So I'm a skateboarder. In 2015, I founded an organisation called Decks for Change. And Decks for Change fundraises for skate park builds and skate park programs all around the world. We've helped to fund creation of skate parks and programs in Iraqi Kurdistan, in Nepal, in Cambodia. And we're also looking at building a skate park with Timor Skate at the end of this year in October. So we do this by creating skate art events and fundraising through that. So it relies a lot on the incredible creative community that is so generous with their time and their talents to donate artworks so that we can sell them and build skate parks, basically. Last night was actually the opening of one of our events. And it's in No Vacancy Gallery, so go and check it out. We've got an exhibition going at the moment, which is fundraising for our skate park build in Timor-Leste. This was the last one that we were able to go to. This was in Iraqi Kurdistan. And because of this little thing called COVID, don't know if you've heard of it, we haven't been able to get over and do many projects recently. So this is our first one, Timor-Leste, coming up later this year, which is really exciting. I also get invited to host discussion panels and whatnot about skateboarding and diversity and inclusivity. Skateboarding is something that I started when I was a young, angsty teen, about the age of 13. Are there any skateboarders in here today? Or previous skateboarders? Yeah. Hello, welcome. Skateboarding is one of those things that is really painful, but also really worth it in that it teaches you a lot of life lessons. As a young teenager, I sort of did it because I didn't really fit into any other sports or activities. I didn't like rules, obviously. I really liked the fuck the man vibe of skateboarding. That suited me well, and that's what drew me to it. But I stopped skateboarding for a little bit when I turned 18. I tried to become an adult and I stopped it. But I found it again when I was 25. And I think coming back to skateboarding as an adult, it really opened my eyes to how valuable it is in terms of teaching you life lessons. So first of all, with skateboarding, you have to learn to push through your fear or you actually don't get anywhere. So you have to really learn to embrace fear, not ignore it, but embrace fear and embrace vulnerability so that you can continue to push through and excel and land tricks. It teaches you persistence. So what happens with skateboarding is that you'll try a trick and it might take you 3 years to master, it might take you a few minutes. But it teaches you to keep trying and trying and trying and trying and trying again. And when you first try a trick, it can take years, days, or minutes, but it usually goes something like this. So this is my friend Holly. She skates for Pearl Skateboard. Holos3000 on Instagram if you want to give her a follow. But when you first try a trick, usually it goes like this. You're shitting yourself, firstly, because you are about to try something that you've never done before. You're also thinking about your current capabilities and what's just lying on the edge of those current capabilities. So because it's something you haven't done before, you obviously want to push what your current capabilities are, but you also need to know that you can actually attempt this without dying. You do this a little bit, you sort of scope out the trick, you get yourself hyped up, you do a little bit of a run up, and you pretend to do it just to get your body used to actually running up and trying something for the first time. You've also got behind the camera lens, me and all of our friends, and we're there giving you advice and giving you support, and we're saying, you can do this. We know you can do this. And we give you advice if you ask for it. We don't just yell out unsolicited advice. And then you have to take your first push. And when you take your first push, it looks something like this. You eat shit. You eat shit. And you eat shit again. But each of these times, you're learning something. So your muscles are learning what to do and what not to do. You're learning how fast you need to go to approach the trick. You're learning at what point you need to pop. And you're also becoming more and more comfortable with failing and pushing through that fear. You've also got the advice and support from your friends in the background as well, just continuing saying, you're doing a great job, you've got this, next try, next try. And that next try, we say that about 100 times, but we still believe it every time. Next try, you'll land it. And then eventually you do. Eventually you land it. Woo! And then your friends join in. And what you can't hear on this video is everyone screaming and supporting and saying, yes, you did it. The good thing I love also about skateboarding is that there is really no mastering it. So here, Holly's landed this trick, awesome. But then we went straight on to the next one. It's a constant evolution. And also just because Holly landed this trick once doesn't mean that she's guaranteed to land it again and again and again. She's got to keep practicing, she's got to keep trying. And what I've realized sort of throughout life and looking at my career and the many random projects that I've done, I sort of approached everything like a skate trick. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today, especially in times when we are feeling scared and we're faced with such huge problems, complex problems. It is natural to feel scared and to want to run away and to feel frozen. But if we sort of approach them like a skate trick, you can all think like a skater. So usually what happens is you've got a challenge, right? So we've got a challenge or we've got a trick that we want to do that we haven't done before. The first step is to feel scared. The first step is to shit yourself, really. You have to let yourself do that. And embrace vulnerability. It's really vulnerable being a skateboarder, trying a trick in front of people that you've never tried before, because you know that you're going to make a fool of yourself, but you've just got to embrace it because you know that eventually you keep trying, you'll land it. So embracing vulnerability is really important. So is being able to assess your current and prospective capabilities, knowing what your limits are, but also considering what your sphere of influence is and what your capabilities could be. Advice and support from community is so important in all of this as well. Being able to have people that will just say, good job, keep going. Being able to have experts to talk to get advice from is so extremely helpful. And then, of course, the first push. After the first push, knowing that you're going to fail and fail and fail, but eventually you'll land it and you iterate and you evolve. Something that's really scared the shit out of me recently is the IPCC report. Has anyone read this? Has anyone heard of it? Okay, cool. So the IPCC report it stands for Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Basically, it's over 1,000 peer-reviewed scientific journals that provide the foundational report for this. And it talks about the current state of climate change, how we got here, and where we're heading. Now, I've got some stats here to read for this, so strap in. So the latest IPCC report, the AR6, it tells us that global surface temperature has increased faster since 1970 than in any other 50-year period over the last 2,000 years. It tells us that warming is likely to exceed 1.5 degrees in the 21st century. It also tells us that fossil fuels are the biggest driver of this. They're the biggest driver of climate change. It tells us that the most developed countries have the highest per capita emissions, which is us. Yet the least developed countries are the hardest hit by extreme weather and climate events, food insecurity, and reduced water security. It tells us that we're currently experiencing irreversible losses of our ecosystems. And it also tells us that the time is now. So the choices and the actions that we make today are going to have impacts now, but also impacts for thousands of years. So after reading this, I felt scared. Definitely felt scared. And sometimes I do feel scared. I had to cry in bed for a couple of hours. But I also embraced that. And I embraced the vulnerability. And I thought, I'm going to have to approach this like a skate trick, get to the next stage, and push through this fear. I looked at my current and my prospective capabilities. So currently, personally, I think activism is a really good thing that we can be doing. I've got a stat here, which is analysis by the Social Change Lab. It says that collective protest movements can be 100 times more effective than carbon offsetting in terms of CO2 reduction. And of course, it's a lot more cost effective than the best charities and NGOs. So I know that that's within my current capability, and I'm going to continue to show up and go to climate change rallies and go to Invasion Day rallies and do as much as I possibly can in terms of activism. I also am aware that Indigenous communities represent 3.8% of the community, yet they protect 80% of all biodiversity. So what's also within my current capability is that I can pay the rent. I continue to pay the rent. I can continue to listen to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voices and take their lead on these issues. Professionally, within my current capabilities, I know how to do circular design, which is great. I know how to teach people about the circular economy. And I think that that is a really good intervention point as well in terms of an industry that's very unregulated and creates a lot of waste and uses a lot of fossil fuels. So that's sort of on my brain. I come up with a few ideas about how I can sort of create ripples within my own sphere of influence and talk to my community and my friends about what I could be doing more. And I took a little first push. So I'm sharing with you today another one of my little side projects, which is a response to having a breakdown after reading the IPCC report and then approaching that like a skater. So after looking at my current and prospective capabilities, after talking to friends, considering spheres of influence, what I realized is that there is a much greater opportunity to have an impact in the things that I'm doing. So another little side project that I'm looking at the moment is this thing called Civic. And it looks at redefining brand activations for a sustainable world. Eventually, it's going to look something like this. So we want to have a sort of three-tiered approach to this. And that would be, first of all, turning off the tap of all of this waste being created by our industry. And turning off the tap means that we need to be talking to all of these agencies, experiential marketing agencies, brand activation agencies, design agencies, and giving them the skills that are industry relevant to help them turn off the tap. to run circular design workshops with them, to talk to them about sustainable design, to run life cycle analysis with them and things like that, to turn off the tap. The second part of that would be to support operational change. When we're dealing with such a huge shift in industries, there also needs to be support to help that happen within a complex system as well. And while that's all happening, recovering resources while you're turning off the tap is also very important. So collecting resources from brand activations that have ended, and then stripping them back, turning them back into materials that can be used again and resuming their lives. So that's the overarching idea. At the moment, this is a little baby first push. So at the moment, what I'm doing is I'm running workshops. So I'm running workshops for the industry that creates brand activations, exhibitions in sustainable design and just learning sustainability literacy, life cycle thinking, so how you can actually consider the entire life cycle of products that you're using and that you're responsible for, from extraction to transport, manufacturing, use and end of life. Also looking at circular design strategies and co-creating sustainability goals with people. So that's my baby first push, and see what happens. Might fail, who knows? But I will have learned something. I will have learned something and I'll continue to iterate and evolve and keep trying. Because that's the beautiful thing about skateboarding as well, is that there is just absolutely no mastering it. But there is a constant evolution. And I think that's what's really important to embrace in doing meaningful work, and especially if you're looking to do work that's combating climate change and making sure that we don't go over the 1.5 degree threshold, is that there is going to be no end goal. And there is going to be no perfect goal that we're going to achieve or thing that we're going to tick off our list. It is a constant evolution. There's no mastering it. So I invite you all to approach problems like a skater. Feel the fear. Allow yourself to shit your pants. Embrace that vulnerability. Very importantly as well, seek advice and support from your community, from your friends, from experts. And be very willing to fail, because pushing through failure is the only way to succeed. And I would love to leave you with this lovely quote by Margaret Mead, which reads, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has." Thank you. I'll keep it for questions.
Yeah. Don't go anywhere. So no questions on Slido, which tells me that you've all got burning questions you'd like to ask with your voice. Any questions for Kirby? We've got a few minutes.
There are two on Slido.
Sorry?
Two questions on Slido.
Ah.
Oh, do you want to read it?
Sarah, would you like to read one of them for me?
How do you overcome the paralysis of feeling like the problem is too big and take the first meaningful steps towards some change?
This was my question. That was my dummy question. Sorry,
No,
Sarah.
that is a good question. It is.
Go. You've got to go.
That is a good question about, sometimes the problems can feel so big that they do paralyse you. And that's what's so important, this, knowing your current capabilities, understanding your current sphere of influence, because we can't solve these giant problems, but we are also not powerless in that. We make decisions every single day that have outcomes that are either negative or positive. And that could be as simple as something that you're buying at the grocery store, to how you're voting, to how you're choosing to spend your Saturday. That we do have power in that. So I think the first step to, pushing past that paralysing bit of fear is, well, firstly feeling it and acknowledging it and being vulnerable to it, and then looking at your current and your prospective capabilities, your network, your sphere of influence, your skills. Like, there's so many skills in this room, that you can use for good. You've all got superpowers and they can all be used for good individually. So I think first step is just looking to your current capabilities and thinking, how can I apply that to create some sort of meaningful change?
Yeah, thanks, Kirby. Well, that was the test question that I put in. It was also a genuine question that I had, so I really appreciate it, because it can be, it can be really overwhelming to think you've got to you've got to do it like someone else is doing it, but that's never going to be the most helpful way to do stuff, right? Like whether it's skateboarding or holding a rally or whatever, you know, it's got to be the thing that you can actually do something with.
And it all counts, and also you don't really know how measurable your change is going to be. You don't know if someone's going to walk past and see you do something and then that inspires them to then do something. You've got to do it, because if not, what else are you going to do?
Yeah, agreed. There's a couple more questions coming through on the Slido now. Thank you, everyone. So, and this is a great one. What do you think about working with big brand baddies to try and affect change, or working with smaller, more ethical organisations? Great question.
I think both. I think both is a good mix. I guess it depends on the industry as well. There are definitely limits to the brands that I'm willing to work with, and those limits are probably more ethical. So for example, I'll say it, SodaStream wanted me to do an activation, but they directly fund apartheid in Israel and Palestine, so I said no to that. So there are things that I think it's okay to say no to. Also, I'm in a privileged position where I could say no to that and I could afford to say no to that. So obviously there's going to be trade-offs. But I think there's also really big opportunities in big brands to make changes as well. So it depends. I think a good mix of both. And the big brands can also fund some decent change as well.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there's always something to be said for being able to affect change from within the belly of the beast. Sometimes can be worthwhile.
Yeah.
Another fabulous question on the Slido. What are your self-care techniques for pulling yourself up after facing the fear and feeling the pain of scary problems? What is your post-cry-in-bed routine?
Friends.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was an absolute workaholic. I mean, I still am a bit of a workaholic, but with limits. But I was a workaholic and I burnt out so many times, and I realised it was just because I wasn't connecting with people. I wasn't connecting with the people that I loved and the people that I care about, because they really re-energize you and they want to hear about your day and your problems and all of that. You don't have to keep it all to yourself. So honestly, the most important part of self-care routine, I think, is just having a good support network, talking to people, reaching out to people and be like, I'm having a shit day, do you want to go for a drink?
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Friends. This is a somewhat related question. You have so many projects on the go. How do you make sure you keep the energy, or have the energy to make sure they all succeed?
They don't all succeed, and that's okay.
Yeah.
They don't. Like, some of them fail, and that's fine. Like, you just learn from it and on to the next. But yeah, in terms of energy, I have ADHD, so if you want to go get that, that's pretty handy.
Great advice. Okay. Yeah, I always think it's interesting with people who have lots of energy for new things. I'm one of those people as well, is that you throw out a whole lot of seeds and then sometimes they all germinate at the same time. You're like, well, fuck, what do I do now?
Yeah, that's literally this week.
Yeah. Any other questions for Kirby? Yeah.
Send me an email.
I'm just going to repeat the question for the video.
Sorry.
So the question was curious about the workshops. Where are they? When are they? How do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, so at the moment they're more B2B, so with companies, but I also will be running them open to public every now and then. So if you would like to just go to Civic, SIVIK.world, and you can contact through there, sign up to the mailing list, and I'll let you know. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Kirby, thank you so much. I think you're the perfect personification of one of my favourite philosophies, which is that the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So thanks for coming here and doing things your way with us this morning. It was fabulous. I think you've given everyone some excellent food for thought. Can we hear it again for Kirby Clark?
Thank you.